Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mapping the Road to Recovery, How Lived Experience Transforms Mental Health Services and Systems. My name is Jason Maurer. I am a mental health advocacy consultant working with the WHO Regional Office for Europe. And I'm joined here by three wonderful experts who are going to be having a conversation with us today. And I'd like to start with everyone introducing themselves, and then we can get right into the interesting bits. Peter, would you like to?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. My name's Peter McGovern. I'm a consultant psychiatrist from Norway. I work at Modum-Bod's Trauma Clinic. And I also have a background as working with the WHO on their Quality Rights Initiative and the recent mental health policy guidance and strategic action planning.
Thank you. Marina.
So my name is Marina Vidović. I come from small city of Split from Croatia. I am myself peer support worker, so person with lived experiences of mental health challenges. And I'm an intentional peer support trainer and a founder of a small local NGO, Phoenix Split.
Thank you. And Michael?
Thank you, Jason. My name is Michael Ryan, and I'm from County Mayo in the west of Ireland. I'm a person of lived experience, but happily in recovery today. I work with the HSE, Health Service Executive in Ireland. I'm an expert by experience, if you like, with them, and I lead a national department on the development of recovery and service user engagement.
Thank you so much, all. And we're here to talk about lived experience. I think let's start with that. Can somebody, I won't select two unless you want me to, start with what is lived experience, and more specifically, how is it a form of expertise?
I think lived experience is a word we hear a lot of nowadays in lots of context, and really in our context of health or mental health, it's about the experience of maybe living with a mental health challenge, recovering from that, and being able then to articulate that in a way that might help others through peer support or bringing about organisational change by working within a system. So, a person with lived experience, will understand their own story. That's really what it's about, what happened to me, and what's happened, that maybe they've come to a place of recovery or well-being. And I suppose that's really why we call it a form of expertise, because that knowledge is essential and very helpful to other people who might be on a recovery journey from a similar place, but also to organisations who want to become more person-centred, more recovery focused. So they need to talk to people with lived experience who knows what works and what doesn't work. But I think lived experience does have an application for everyone in terms of, it's about understanding my own journey and what happened. So it's a very personal thing. Even a word I heard today was, a sacred place to come from. The qualities that a person or the journey one goes and understanding their own lived experience, that's transferable. It's not just about the person with their own mental health challenge. It's also applicable to professionals in terms of what's their lived experience as a practitioner. And really it's about the values and the principles of recovery and person-centeredness and how am I with that. To engage with your own lived experience, I think you need to have a process of self-reflection, and for a professional that might be, if I was in the situation of this person, what would I want to happen for me? What would I want to know about this diagnosis, this treatment, and where would I like to go with it? So I think at the heart of lived experience is, the human value of the person and what's happened to them and what's their story.
I think Ryan said it very nicely. I would maybe add also that if you want to be in a role of peer support worker, then you need certain education besides your own, of course, experience, which is the basic and the most important part. But it's also important to learn how to use your own experience as a tool of supporting others on their recovery journey. And it doesn't mean to be like instructing them. It's quite the opposite. It's more about giving hope and inspiration through your own story and your own awareness. So yeah, that's for me important.
Yeah, I'd probably also say that for me, lived experiences probably represents the gap or the hole or the missing link in today's current services. And it's an untapped wealth of knowledge is another way to kind of put it. And for me, something that kind of represents the person's voice. And unfortunately, in mental health services, we have an unfortunate track record of not necessarily listening to the voices of the people that we're supposedly there to help and support. So I think that's it's a way to kind of rebalance power as well. And I'm sure that's going to be a part of our conversations today. But I think there's a real dynamic force behind lived experience as well.
Definitely.
So we're going to come at this from a couple of different angles here, but I want to see how each of you comes at it. Let's start with maybe Marina. You are a peer support worker, and therefore you are using your lived experience on a daily basis to help others who have gone through the system. When did you start realizing that your experience could be used in that way as a form of expertise? And we were talking about this a bit before, but you don't consider it expertise in some way. But when did you start realizing you could help people with what you're doing and what you experienced?
Well, when myself, I got diagnosis of bipolar disorder like 18 years ago. And I was in search also for tools and for context and people who can support me in my recovery journey. And unfortunately, what I was given was mostly biomedical pharmacotherapeutical model, which for me wasn't quite working, or it wasn't working completely as I was hoped to. And I myself was having lots of auto-stigma about seeing myself, because previously I was a student of social pedagogy, I was in education for psychotherapists, and now suddenly I was on the other side, another side of the couch. And for me it felt quite, I was surprised how dehumanizing and embarrassing and shameful I really felt in that role, which was quite surprised because I was supposed to help people like me before. And for me it was like very hard to acknowledge that I'm also one of those people. And I wasn't aware that I have this power hierarchical perspective before. It was quite humbling, to be honest. And then I realized there is not much support, at least not unfortunately in my country, Croatia, and in my city, and I needed more than that. So we just kind of connected together, people who met in a hospital. We had one really amazing psychiatrist who led group therapy with us, but she left institution, went to work privately, and then we didn't have groups anymore. And we just said, but we are getting well really together, we formed some bond together, let's go and meet each other, grab a coffee somewhere. So we actually started in cafe places and talking about our hallucinations and some crisis and some hard topics. So with time, it became a little bit like maybe this is not suitable place because from other people would just listen and be in shock. And it wasn't like what we really needed. So we just asked from some NGOs, because I used to work in this sector, maybe can someone give us their space just to lend it for us for an hour every week, and we just starting to meeting each other. And through these meetings, even we weren't like educated what is peer support work. We didn't know it exists in that form. We just needed human contact. We needed each other. We needed space where we can talk about our experiences without fear that someone would silence us or give us certain pill to lower our voices or diminish the symptoms. We just wanted to be accepted as who we are at that specific point. And we find out through time that this was very, very healing. It created, as you said, one really amazing space when different people with different diagnoses in different aspects of their life come together, and we just be together for that hour. And we share our problems with pills, with doctors, with families, with work conditions. And that was very helpful. Even we didn't have any specialists officially, like psychologists or psychiatrists, something like that. We were just people connected with mutual experiences. So that's how we started, like very grassroots, with what we have, where we were, just started doing it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Michael, I would like to ask the same question of you. How did you, or when did you start to realize that you could use your lived experience as expertise? And maybe how did you get started with that?
It was a kind of a gradual process over many years. I'd been very unwell for a long time and had gone through, hospitalizations, homelessness, a very challenging way of life with kind of my unresolved mental health and addiction challenges. But I did come into recovery, and I just as Mariana shared there, I mean, for my own benefit, I was talking to other people who were going through the same thing as me, and there was a really mutual benefit to it. And I think that's a very important point you make, that people come, because they just want to release from the pain they're in, and sometimes we, try to conceptualize things and start talking about chime and things, it's, we just want some human contact and someone to show understanding of our what's going on for us, and find that space to explore it ourselves. And that was happening for me. And I began to grow, and I began to feel different about myself. And I realized that there was sorry, the word is lost. Edit that bit out. There's a mutual understanding between us. Not only was it helping me, but other people were also getting benefit from it. So I began to understand, that my experience, just wasn't a negative experience, that there was actually something positive about it. And that actually one of the things, for example, was around resilience and strength, like to live through years of that and somehow come out the other side. So I understood the values and the principles of recovery and working in a peer support way, but I never really thought about it in an organisational context until I met a couple of people. One was a psychiatrist and the other was a couple of other clinicians who wanted to make their service more recovery orientated, and then they came to me and said, we would like you to help us or to tell us your experience. And I started doing little pieces of that work, and I gradually became to realise actually people are listening to me. I was expecting any morning to get the phone call, listen, go home, we don't want you anymore. But and I suppose that gave me confidence, and I began to see the value of my own lived experience. And as time goes on, I was able to process it better and became more objective about it. So I think maybe think a little bit more strategic about it. And I was fortunate that in Ireland at the time there was a movement to try and have a more person-centred approach through policy and structures, and organisations and programmes were set up that I was able to become involved in, which ultimately led to, I suppose, becoming part of the National Mental Health Team and being head of the Office of Mental Health Engagement and Recovery. So I suppose the most important thing in that journey was that I realised, the value of lived experience, my own and other people's, and that other people in the organisation with the power to change things and to facilitate the introduction of lived experience did so also.
If I can only, because Ryan was really inspiring, so he reminded me on some parts that I missed. Very important part of these groups and after work was previously I felt so lonely in my illness. And if you ask any person who got a diagnosis, what's the hardest part? Was this abandonment and loneliness. So being connected with people, you finally feel I'm not alone. Someone else is also feeling similar stuff. So that regains your self-worth again. And then with time, of course, otherwise it's just pain and suffering. And when you see that your story, when you're telling it through this media stuff, it just gives you meaning, because your suffering is not just suffering, it can also inspire other people. And I don't see myself as an expert of anything. If I'm expert, I would be, I don't know, flying probably somewhere in the air, and I would be always in a constant Zen state, and it's not like that, of course. Life is in waves, and it still happens to me. So I'm not, and it's too much pressure. I don't want to be expert, like I'm perfect and I don't have mental health problems. I'm a very emotional person, and I'm okay with that. But I think our stories, when they are shared, they help people to stop having auto-stigma, to remember that they are human beings besides diagnosis and besides some problems and symptoms, that they may be amazing painter, of they were good in mathematics, or they are amazing neighbors, or they are good parents to their children. So very often in the system, unfortunately, human being is forgotten. It's just beside some F number, and you are F31, and that's very scary and very dehumanizing feeling. So in peer support spaces, we just are free of these labors. We are free of this, and start to learn to see ourselves to other lenses also, to remind ourselves that we are amazing human beings with different capabilities and with some specific problems. But this is why I love peer support work, because we can inspire each other, we can be sort of beacon of hope to someone who's maybe just got diagnosis or listening to this on psychiatric ward, tied down, or in some really tough place. So you can listen to someone who says, I've been there too, and it was hard, and it felt like impossible battle, but I'm here, I'm still alive and kicking, and I'm even invited on this amazing meeting to talk about my experience. So this gives people hope, and I think hope is the sacred ingredient very often lost in the system.
I would love to ask you a similar question from a different perspective, but before that, I'd just like to ask a little bit of clarification on auto-stigma. What is that? Could you explain it in?
For me, I think it's different for every person, but when someone tells you in certain point of life, you know, you are now mentally ill, your illness is for a lifetime, you can't trust your mind anymore because your mind is ill, or your thoughts. Okay, but I have my heart. Well, you have bipolar disorder, so you can't trust your feelings also because they're over compared to other people. So you are too emotional sometimes. And then you just stay, then who am I? And then I ran to spirituality. Okay, some sacred spaces, but then my psychiatrist told me, Marina, that's dangerous for you because you can get religiously, because I have experiences of some psychosis also connected to religion. So you can't also go there. Then what are you? Then you start to see yourself only through these lenses, and you are then scared of every emotion. Am I too happy? Is this too much happiness? Am I too sad? How much sad I can be? When my dog dies or when something happens, is this illness or is this just me? What is me? So you become completely lost, and you lose, unfortunately, very often, trust in yourself. And you just don't believe that all this, for instance, for me, beautiful dreams of becoming dance movement therapist and going to somewhere to get a scholarship and to help other people, you feel damaged. You feel like something's wrong with you, like same rules doesn't apply to you. And that's the most scary part of the illness. I don't mind that much my manic states or either my hallucinations or my visions, because I have experiences of both of them. But the scariest part is that you're afraid of yourself, that you don't know anymore who are you and what are the boundaries, what experiences I, for instance, love dance. And dance is a very important part of my life. But at a certain period, I was told that I'm forbidden to dance because while I dance, I go to altered states of mind, like dervishes. That's my superpower, but that's also very scary. So I was just cut from very, very, very parts that mean Marina to me in the past. And for a very long time, I was completely lost. And I think auto-stigma is that you really believe what you are told about yourself. And when you don't trust yourself anymore, that you are the expert of your own even expert who makes mistakes, but still the better expert than some people who, I don't want to diminish their knowledge and I respect all professions, but we only know about ourselves, what it means to us to cry, what it means to us to be in too much pain, or how to be in a pain that you can surpass. So I think the light should be lightened on this spot again.
Thank you. Peter, I want to know, they both spoke to their lived experience and how they're using it in their work. And you're approaching this from the perspective of psychiatry. And you referred earlier to lived experience as this gap that people have in the system have yet to kind of fully embrace. When did you start to embrace it? When did you realize that there was this untapped resource for your work for helping people get better?
Well, I guess I was lucky in some regards in that prior to starting in psychiatry, I was doing a bit of work at the WHO with Michelle Funk and Natalie Drew, and learnt an awful lot about the importance of recovery and the importance of rights in mental health, and how these tools that we're talking about today are that which leads to recovery and to living a good life again. So I think I probably started with that and then got the psychiatry bit on top, which I think is probably the right way to do things. I was also quite lucky in that in the service I was working with in England, in Bristol, the recovery team I was working for in particular, we had peer support workers integrated in our teams, people with lived experiences, part of team discussions with an equal voice, contributing on a fair level with everybody else in the room. And I guess it sounds very simplistic, but to have that experience of, wow, these are totally unique perspectives, and perspectives that I found immediately quite clinically relevant and really helpful in my work. And I felt I was learning a hell of a lot more from those interactions and those consultations that I was perhaps elsewhere. And that then through being involved in the Quality Rights Initiative, meeting peer support workers and people with lived experience groups from around the world, and seeing how important that voice is, and then really kind of thinking how far behind we are in the majority of mental health services. That it is, I think Marina is making some really interesting points there about self-stigma, auto-stigma, and how, to a certain extent, it's an internalization of that discriminatory attitude that is out there. And I think, that's probably something that as a young doctor I had to confront, that I had absorbed discriminatory attitudes and stigmatizing views on what it is to live with mental health challenges, and then having those challenged and combated in real time in a way that was very important for my own growth as a clinician, I would say.
Thank you. My brain is processing. It's all very interesting. I think we've heard from all of you about the, it is important to have lived experience involved in these spaces. Peer support worker working in championing recovery at the national level, and working as a clinician to support that. I want to go into a bit more detail about the kinds of insights that lived experience can provide in practice. So anyone can start with this, but what are the things that wouldn't happen without a lived experience perspective in a let's say a medical center?
I think one of the conversations we've been having is your point, Marina, that idea of getting away from the concept of expertise. I think that's something that's deeply ingrained in medical culture and in health systems culture. And I think that peer support challenges that quite directly in a positive way. And I think it also kind of reminds us that in the field of mental health, there's a certain amount of not knowing that you have to be able to tolerate and deal with. And although we would like to have concrete solutions, that's not always the case. And I'm reminded of our conversation earlier, how difficult it can be for clinicians to meet a kind of level of suffering and distress that can't be solved by 12 sessions of psychotherapy or medical interventions or a brief stay in a rehab unit. We're talking about society level injustices that play out on a very individual basis. And I think from my experience, that's something that people with lived experience and peer support workers, they have experience of it themselves, and they're often much better placed to really give expression to that and to put words on that. And I think that's an important reminder for people working from the kind of healthcare provider side.
And I think it's quite, if I can, add, quite challenging, because if you are in your school for 4, 5, 10 years and you are studying how to recognize a person with certain symptoms, and it's a sign of a good professional if you're fast into finding out what's wrong with someone and in order to help him. But being a person who needed that help, I found through 18 years on this road from diagnosis to recovery, which wasn't right or no road. It's also important that we say it's like sometimes messy, sometimes circles, sometimes stepping back for a while to catch some air to run. So it's not always linear. But it's, what I wanted to say that it's, I lost what I wanted to say. You reminded me before that, it's a sign of knowledge. But peer support is about something else. It's about curiosity and about really not knowing. And that's a tough position to be in our society, which put praises to opposite. But for us, for me, the most helpful people that I met were the people who were honest about not knowing, about being scared by some of my experiences, about being shocked, but who were willing to just stay with me in these difficult places and deal with their emotions also, take care of themselves, of course, but be there for me as much as they can be there for me. Because no one can really save me except me. I need to do the job. But it's really helpful if someone is sitting next to me and I see in their eyes that they really understand, or they are willing to feel the difficult emotions like sadness or despair or panic together with me. That's really helpful. It's like it gives me strength, then I can continue by myself. And these little connections are the ones that in peer support happen like magic every time that when we sit together. And we also need to be aware of, for instance, in peer support group, of our dynamics. And it's very easy to be in the role, oh, you are the expert, Marina, tell us, you are so good now, I'm not good like you. And then you need to remind yourself, it's not about that. You are expert for yourself. I can be here, I can share some of my tools, maybe won't be useful for you. But I think the only existence of person with lived experience in the team or in the community of people with challenges, someone who is already on the path of recovery and maybe gained some stuff that you wish you have. So their existence is a symbol of hope, as I said before. But not only the hope for people with challenges, but I think also very often professionals in their professional work, especially if they do many years in the services, they also lose hope in their job and the meaning of it, especially if they see people returning year after year, and they're given their best and they're still returning. So I think it's a very hard job. And still to remain like with an open heart and open to people, that you are not the wall and just doing your job. It's very, very hard. And I respect that. But for them, it's also important to see peer workers and people with lived experiences, because they're also, for them, symbol that their job also has meaning and that there is recovery and there is quality of life that people can regain, not just be like zombies who take their medication and sleep and come for the next appointment, but people who are still dreaming and living their life and having families and going out to dance on rock music on a festival or creating some beautiful artwork. So we still deserve quality of life as any other human being, and we can reach there also. Yes, we need sometimes some support, some cheerleading maybe, even more. But I think peer workers bring that. They bring, okay, it's possible, I can see it in you. If you can do it, maybe I can do it also. So I think that's really something that was missing for many, many years in this specific part of medicine.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying, Mariana, and it reminds me of when my first encounter kind of peer support and put me on the road to recovery was when someone I knew had the same challenge as me, came to visit me in the hospital and asked me what were, I suppose, some challenging questions, saying, Michael, there's something not right in your life and you're going to have to find out what that is. And it doesn't matter whether you agree with what the doctors are saying or not.
But isn't Ryan completely different than saying something's wrong with you?
Yeah, very much.
And very often we are just given that, not something's wrong in your life and you can change it. It's completely different.
Yeah.
And that set an internal question inside me. And it also helped that this person I had seen being very unwell and now seemed to have their life in a different place.
Boring,
Yes, and that word, expertise, it's a word I use a lot. And I think I use it in the context of what you were talking about there, Peter, that there's kind of an absence of knowledge maybe on the professional side around what it's actually like to live with a mental health challenge, or and that's kind of to share that experience, is a knowledge, and that I used to assume that everybody knew what it was like, but they didn't. And so really it's about the autonomy of the person we're talking about. It is what you're talking about there, empowerment, and person-centeredness is another word that we hear a lot about. But if we're really putting the person at the center, what does recovery mean to them? And I think we probably need to think about things and recovery in a contemporary sense, that it's not just about the elimination of symptoms, which is very, very helpful if they can be managed better. But today I would say I'm recovered, but it doesn't mean I'm cured. And what's the difference is that I can manage that fear today. I can manage the racing thoughts better. I can manage the obsessiveness and the extreme anxiety because I stopped running away from my mental health and handing it over to someone else to cure it, and I kind of came into relationship with it, and that made all the difference for me. And today recovery is about being the best person you can be. I think as Patricia Deegan has said that. And what does that mean? It's achieving my potential as a person. It's being able to connect with my community, have a family life, pursue hobbies and interests and all that, have a home. And if that's what we call recovery, then what is a recovery-orientated service? It's a service that can facilitate people to achieve that. So it's totally unrealistic to think that a doctor who's, clinical expertise is very important on the journey, but it's unfair to expect him to do all the rest as well. So we need to bring all that kind of expertise around the table to help people recover. But it can only be when the person is at the centre. What do I want to do? Where do I want to go? And then the role of everybody else around the table and every professional is one of facilitating recovery for Michael or whoever it is.
Yeah, and I would just really agree with the way that you're talking about recovery there, Michael. And I guess those questions that you were asked and the questions that you're raising now, they strike me as kind of deeply therapeutic questions as well. Who do you want to be? Where do you want to go? What do you want to get out of this life in the short time that we all have? And I think I'd be interested to know your guys' thoughts, because I think some people perhaps from my profession feel that definition of recovery that I would absolutely stand for, that idea of that symptom reduction, or that can be relevant for some people, but it's not necessarily the whole story, and that people can live a great and meaningful life even in the presence of times of quite severe symptoms. I think some people, to generalize maybe in the medical profession, will feel that that's a kind of deeply pessimistic starting point, and I think there's something that needs to be changed there, that actually that's getting in the way sometimes. That exclusive focus on symptom reduction is distracting us from what it actually is to live a good quality life in line with your own kind of personal values and your own personal preferences. So I wonder whether that's a bit of a kind of tension point here that isn't always is talked about. Doctors like to cure people. They like to fix things 100% and send people home happy.
You want to take their superpower from them. So that, of course, don't take that from me. But I completely, Peter, agree, because for me, some experiences that I have on a regular basis, or when it's full moon, or where I don't sleep because I've been on a concert or out all night, and someone would call them symptoms, are the parts of my personality that I wouldn't like to give away. Mm-hmm. And if someone tells that to me, that they will give me a perfect pill, or a doctor who will heal me completely and I won't be bipolar anymore, I wouldn't take it. And not because I'm pessimistic, but because I think these experiences that I survived gave me specific perspective on human relations, on emotions, and knowing myself. Yes, I'm capable of feeling very, very strong despair and sadness, but I can also feel amazing joy and meaning and connectedness of everything, like almost sacred space. So I think how you can cut it, a right amount of this and that, like it's from zero to where. And I think we need to accept the diversity of human experiences and not to give the label to everything, which is a little bit unusual. And also, if we can remember in the past, in science and art and whatever we value in humanity, people who made those differences and some artworks and scientific knowledge were people who crossed some lines, because if they stay inside, nothing changes. So I believe that this shifts and changes in capabilities, that you can feel intensity of all feelings, but of course find your own balance, how to live quality of life with it. It's something that I don't want to be taken away. I think actually if I can be that sort of person, I can say maybe you can learn also from these experiences. I definitely did, and some of them are hard, but there are other ways. And I don't know if symptoms are not the problem, if you ask us, at least not me, maybe for some people are, but it's their choice. It's supposed to be their choice. If I want to have some parts of my visions when I see something in the future that might be happening. Many years ago, it's actually a funny story. When I was in therapy and I was in hospital in manic state, I was describing my doctor why they would like tie us down to our bed when we are in manic states to like calm us down. Because I said, for me, who was studying to be sort of down to movement therapist, I can't calm down when you tie me down. I need to walk, to dance, to move, to calm down. So when you tie me down, when I'm nervous and anxious, it will create worse thing for me, not better. And maybe you can put us in some rooms that are with soft walls and some music and with some aroma that I like, some smells, and that would calm me down. And maybe some sound of river, that's helpful for me. And unfortunately, my doctor said, Marina, are you taking your pills? You have like crazy ideas again. You will do it when you have your private hospital. And I was like, it felt very ugly feeling. And I just put it somewhere in my shelf, one of my crazy ideas. And then 6-7 years after, I was on quality rights training online, and I was reading about safe rooms. And I started to cry, and I could cry now. Because I said, oh my God, look at this, I'm genius. Like I thought about it 10 years ago. And they also say that it's very helpful. So maybe sometimes our ideas are not symptoms to be treated. Yeah. Maybe there are some dreams or solutions or inspiring, I don't know what. Of course, not all experiences are pleasant. There are some unpleasant states that then it feels like it's obvious that you want it to diminish. But ask the person, maybe that pain is lesser than other pain, that this one is a tool. So completely agree with you. Just do what you do. Still.
I've just been informed that we need to take just a short break.
Okay.
Just to fix something with
Mics
the mic. Yeah.
Oh, mine.
I think the hair has
Yeah, probably.
been. But that was wonderful.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah. Super Mario is I have wild hair and I'm like Croatian woman who speaks with the whole body.
Me
so,
too, yeah.
Irish and Croatian.
Animated
Yeah.
full expression, full body.
One thing, when you do like this with your hand, your pen is saying click, clock, click, clock, click.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And you're also like, under the table while you're talking. Yeah. I hope they don't hear my stomach because my stomach is
Yeah, yeah.
all the time.
I think mine's doing that a bit as well.
Oh, it's okay for now, but it's very hot. Is it okay? Ti si subjektivna.
This is wonderful.
Ozbiljno. Okay.
Can we start again? Okay. So I want to come back to, it's been touched on a few times here, that I think all of you have alluded to this concept of recovery. And you, Michael, spent a good deal of time on it. I just wanted to ask mainly about, it's not symptom reduction fully. It's not curing somebody, but it's very personal in a lot of ways. How, if it's so personal, how can practitioners start to work with people in a way to bring about that recovery? And is it something that can only happen within the medical system, or does it need something more?
Well, I would say, it's deeply personal, yes, and it's deeply individualized, but I think we also have a lot that binds us together as human beings. There are themes, and all the recovery research points to themes across cultures, across different parts of the world in terms of what people associate with living a good life and what that actually means. And I think from the clinical point of view, when you read that research and you read about, identity and connectedness and meaning and empowerment, it changes perhaps where you're putting your focus as a clinician. It naturally invites you away from the biomedical understanding into something broader, I think. So that's why I think it has to involve more than just clinicians. I think, even at a economic level, countries around the world are realizing we need to think broader in terms of mental health services. The answer isn't more psychiatrists, more psychologists all the time. We need to have inclusive societies, inclusive workplaces, schools, and environments that actually promote mental health. That's what's going to lead to real change, and dovetails quite perfectly in with the recovery movement, I would say. But I think the commonality that recovery and what does it mean to live a good life, I think that's something that kind of unites people regardless of their of the human experience. And it's also a bridge builder between that power imbalance that exists in the room, the kind of consultant psychiatrist and the person coming into their first appointment. It creates a kind of a more human starting point for a relationship, which is something, Michael, I know you've talked a lot about.
Yeah, I think for me, I suppose language is important, and the word we use is recovery to describe this process where somebody comes to what I would say is a place of well-being, and I think understanding it as a place of well-being might be easier. in terms of that. It's from that platform then that a person can, achieve things in their life, whether that's, to get back to work, get to college, become really good at your hobby, be part of your community, whatever it might be, and grow as a person. And as you were saying, Peter, I mean, everybody can identify with that, so there's almost a personal development piece around it. And, there's a lot of elements that make up, if you struggle with mental health challenges, there's a lot of elements that make up you getting to that place of well-being. And that, some people, you talk about personal recovery, people talk about clinical recovery, but it's, it's about, managing, coming into relationship with your symptoms, depending on what the person wants. It's about understanding your own lived experience, what happened to me, what was my journey, what's important to me. And it's about the basic things, of having a nice place to live, having friends, all these things. And the journey, the process to achieve them, I suppose we can call the recovery journey. So we're probably limited by language a little bit, but to me, recovery is more a verb than a noun.
And I would add, you start with a question. You start with the question, what recovery means for you.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I don't think sometimes recovery isn't becoming the person you once were again. I think sometimes it's set too low for us.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes recovery is a path of growth, that I'm stronger now,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm more resilient and I understand stuff. And also I think it's quite frustrating that when something happens to a person and he or she reacts in this emotional way that affects mental health, that we are only talking about symptoms, because they are final point where they are like messengers of something, and no one asks what they are talking about. And recovery is about hope and optimism for me. It's about self-esteem and self-identity. It's connected to purpose. So if I don't have purpose in my life, of course I will be depressed. It's connected also with the roof of my head, but maybe I want independent living. Maybe someone wants to live with their parents and they prefer that. So we shouldn't have our own ideas about what recovery should be for Ryan or for Marina, because it's our road to recovery. And definitely it's too much that one person is responsible to solving all these mysteries, and good news is he or she isn't. It's our life, we are responsible ones, but it's important that into these conversations those questions are included, that they're included. What happened to you? Do you have enough means for your life? Because if you don't have them, there is no magical pill that can treat that. You can only maybe lower the voices down, and that's even worse then, because you need some energy to do some shifts, to move away, to change the job, to quit maybe your romantic relationship. And it's very everything is intertwined and connected. So recovery is a complicated question, but it also question recovery of what? I would be maybe a little bit philosophical, and I would say that we live in quite sick society, and recovering for it maybe means that we just pretend that everything is okay better. And I don't think that's a good path to go. I think that we really need social change, and to maybe people with mental health problems are very loud people who say this life that we are living isn't the life that we are as humans supposed to live, running after money, more and more stuff, no relaxation, no nature, no arts and crafts, and no beauty in life anymore, because we don't have time for that. And I think this is one part of an explanation why there is rise in mental health problems worldwide, because I think we need much wider picture to change these ways, to see what are our priorities really as humans. And then maybe these symptoms would lower down, because we would satisfy little demons, so to say, and we will be more in contact with ourselves. I think my depression was my biggest savior in a way, because it taught me that either I will live fulfilling life that's in tune with my soul and what I really need and why I came here, or it will be problematic for me to stay here. And I think I feel almost like, what's the word, blessed, because I have that. Because otherwise, if I don't have this strong voice that's very like stubborn, you can't quit, you just need to dig deep, then I would maybe live more, maybe boring life with less drama. But I really love my dramatic life.
I think there's also, you know, sometimes I would hear that kind of easy criticism of recovery as not a serious part of treatment, or a kind of utopian vision that isn't realistic. And to be honest, that just has never really quite made sense for me, particularly in the last years at Modum Bad in Oslo. We've been working with recovery plans with complex trauma survivors. And the thing that once we talk about these themes, you kind of uncover deeply existential themes that are very in line with the therapeutic goals that psychology, the psychiatry are professing to be focused on as well. So I think there's almost I think we're actually pulling in the same direction, because behind these kind of questions about meaning in life, what do I actually want? That's not an easy question to answer for the majority of people. That is naturally a process that's going to take many years, and that the goals and your dreams might change along the way, and it seems profoundly wrong to start off by telling somebody what they should do. That seems like that's doomed to failure almost for anybody, regardless of whether they've been struggling with their mental health or not.
I agree.
So I want to sort of reflect on this conversation a little bit, because I think it's important that, and I don't think anybody has been saying this, but anticipating that there are people out there who don't know necessarily the context of all of this. So, you know, I think both Marina and Michael, you've alluded to the personal responsibility element of recovery, that there is an element required of the person in recovery to move forward, to work on the things, to look back. But I also want to point out, and as both of you did, that other people were there with you, connecting with you. So recovery, to me, what I've been hearing, does not sound like it is something that if you don't recover or if you relapse, that it's a personal responsibility, it's a failing of yours. The system should be there to support that.
Yeah, I would agree. There was a time in my life when I thought I had recovered, and I went back to education, and I started teaching, and it triggered a complete relapse, and I came back into hospitals again, and so on. And you know, I learned a lot from that. You know, that it wasn't a finite thing; that it was something, you know, that I had to keep working on, and that I had to be aware of, you know, what I could do and what I couldn't do. And I suppose one of the things that you mentioned there, Jason, was, you know, that this notion of personal responsibility in recovery, and that can come across as suggesting that we're burdening people with, you know, sort your own life out. And I think for me, what we're talking about there is that it's respecting the autonomy of the person, that you know, we're giving the person back the autonomy to make decisions about their life. And it's the person who has to recover. It was me that had to come to a place that I was happy in my life. So I was the only one who could know that. So anybody trying to tell me what would make me happy, then it's ludicrous if you think about it. So that supporting people in their human right to make their decisions about their own life. I suppose that's I suppose what I think we mean about this idea of personal responsibility. But that has to be a facilitated process. And from that initial conversation I had with my peer in the hospital, it took a long time for things to change, but in my mind that was fermenting. And we need to create spaces like Marina's talking about there, safe peer support spaces where you can come and just be yourself, recovery education spaces where you can hear from other people, this is what happened to me, this was my journey, I'm in a better place now. I choose to call it recovery, whatever it is. So there is, one of the first things I ever read, I think, about recovery was from Julie Repper, and she talked about 3 concepts of hope. You have to believe that recovery is possible, that something can get better, that I can get better, really. And, autonomy then, that I'm given the power back to do that in my life, that other people stop making decisions about it and I step up a little bit to make my own decisions. But the other very important thing she said then was opportunity, So, it's no good telling people these things without actually giving them the support, the opportunity and the means to start to achieve that recovery in their own life.
I think that's a very good point as well, the way you're describing it as it's not a passive process or an end in itself. It's something that's very active, and I think we talk a lot about empowerment and what does that actually mean. It means, in recovery and recovery planning terms, it's about proactively planning for those difficult times, that and not existing in a bubble assuming that everything's going to go wonderfully. That I work with a group of people that would have experienced quite very severe childhood trauma often. And I think to suggest that that's something you just get over or forget or move on from seems really terrible to even talk in those terms. I think, sometimes we will have challenges in our lives that will pop up and that will cause crises, cause difficult times. But if you have that ability and your own self-knowledge and support from services around you, that you can tackle them in a different way and tackle them in a way that are in line with your own preferences, your own values as a human being, that's a totally different experience than powerlessness and being having your rights taken away from you, for example, or being coerced into treatment models or practices that you don't feel are helpful. That's where the empowerment bit comes from. It's often those experience of difficult times, but from a slightly different perspective and a more a place of agency and a bit more control, really.
And I would add to the table also, for instance, in intentional peer support, we use the phrase very often in existent world, we are moving away from symptoms, from crisis, but we are very rarely moving towards what we want, what we wish, what we dream about. And dreams are very important, not in a way like you don't see this dirty reality, look at the clouds and ships and count them. But it's, if we don't have dreams, then we just quit. We quit living. We need them in everyday life, and people with mental health problems also have them. And also what I very often hear with good intentions, but very often we are seen as fragile. Like you don't speak about that. If we speak about suicide, maybe I want to commit suicide. And I think that's really crazy, because it doesn't happen like that. And it's very childish almost for me, because if we survive something inside us, we can survive it. So we can talk about it, and we wish that we share it with you. Maybe you're scared more than I from certain experiences, because I've been there, I know them. And also I would even talk about recovery for me, what it was, because at first this story really resonates with me, Michael, because I was also thinking, I'm on such a good path. Now I'm peer support worker, I founded my NGO, we have amazing projects, people are coming, I'm on TV, even I don't like to be, I'm always invited, I don't know why. But I survive it somehow, my family knows it's very stressful for me. And then I ended up in hospital again, and I felt completely devastated. I thought, maybe everything that I was talking is complete rubbish. I didn't move anywhere. And it was the hardest actually for me. It was very hard to see myself in a mirror on the ground again, while I was already almost flying. But then with time I learned that's also important part, to learn that recovery is not linear from point A to point B to point C. It's very individual, and also life happens. We are not in the like golden or glass, what's the word in English, but you understand what I mean. It happens, emotions happen, losses happen, deaths happen to you, and of course it affects whole your being and also your mental health. So I needed to learn to be more gentler toward myself, and I needed to admit that life is very messy road, and maybe for me recovery today is especially being something called bipolar, but I like more other words to describe myself. But since I'm from Adriatic Sea, I like it's learning how to be on the waves who move constantly. So you just adjust the pressure, you change because life happens. And if you're in tune with yourself and also with those nature that you can't, you are not the ruler of that, it just happens. But you can be the one who dances with the waves. So for me, recovery is that, to get to know yourself and to see where is the road where you want to go, maybe sometimes from not directly, maybe turn around and go back, but to live again a quality of life that you once desired, to again make it visible to yourself and to others, and walk your steps towards that. And if you have some people, and if you're lucky enough to have some people on your road who will be supporters and cheerleaders for you, then that's even better, because in company everything is nicer. And as human beings, I never seen more beautiful people in my life, but in psychiatric wards. I think those are the most beautiful people, and I talk about inside, because very often those people are like dignity is taken away, they're like masks are taken away, they can't pretend to be someone else, they're just who they are, sometimes like with broken bones of their souls and stuff like that. But amazing their beauty, because there's a lot of bravery in that honesty of showing your pain and showing your suffering to others, and being rejected and pushed away and still be there. I think like that's something that's really, it's amazing. So also to see that besides what we usually see. We see ugly parts, but there's also beauty in it. And I don't want to romanticize illness. Illness is, or a state that is troubling for me. Okay, I need to change it, but there is also some learning besides it. There is some deeper meaning in becoming a human who you want to become. I'm like in a church. Sorry.
So I want to now get more to the concrete. I think we've...
Concrete.
Yeah, exactly. So we've talked about lived experience and recovery, and I now want to talk about it in the context of mental health services. It sounds like there's quite a diversity of roles and ways in which lived experience can help. I would just like to ask, maybe starting with Marina, because you are a peer support worker, what is it that you do on a day-to-day basis? And then we can maybe move around to see what other ways in which lived experience can be used in mental health services.
Yeah. For us in Split and in Croatia, we still don't have it in the services like traditionally, like in other countries. We are just starting this process. There is actually only one peer worker officially employed in the system in Psychiatric Hospital of Vrapče right now. So it's almost experimental for us. But peer workers exist for many years, 16, 20 years in Croatia, but they're mostly in the communities. So we are in different NGOs, usually founded by people with lived experience who wanted difference and something more. So we just started little like hubs in different cities. So there are lots of such NGOs in Croatia, La Ludruga or Lukjernica or Phoenix in Split, which is my NGO. And we offer the most, for me, sacred and important space is peer support groups, which are free of charge, and they are for all people who experience altered state of mind. So it doesn't matter if they have some diagnosis or they've been to psychiatric treatment, but they're all welcome. It doesn't matter which F do you have, you're just welcome. And we just offer that free support to each other there on a mutual and same level grounds. But also it depends, we as NGO also organize various activities in community which are connected to peer support. For instance, we try to see what qualities and values and knowledge our peers have when they come. So some of them lead board game nights in some cafes, who came as first people who wanted to help, but then with time they became volunteers, and then now they're included in community as someone who brings some knowledge and some beauty to it. Because leaving a good impact in the world, I think it's very important for every one of us. So we have carpentry, gardening workshops in the community, and we're trying to like break the stigma, which Split is like very specific city, touristic city, which is all about looks and beauty and how it looks from outside. So it's very hard to have that diagnosis there because it's not very sexy and very like something that you wish to present to others. So we try to shift the paradigm about what inclusion means. So we usually say, you're welcome to our activities, even if you don't have diagnosis. So we will welcome you. So it's a sort of a joke, but it's not joke really. So we have really nice events like carpentry, elementary school with people with schizophrenia and borderline, build chairs together with pupils and teachers and neighbors for children in that school. So we try to do this sort of crazy stuff in community. And also we offer support individually. If someone is in crisis, they can reach to us. Unfortunately, we still don't have our own space in our city. We're waiting. Keep your fingers crossed that we give it from officials from our city. So we are very creative, and we offer our support in various different NGOs, and we talk with people in crisis, try to help them to reach the different assistance, what they need, to redirect them where they can get it. Because when you are dealing with some illness for 20 years, you're quite experienced. You know what exists in your city, you know what is free of charge, what do you need to do, and that's very helpful for people when they just got lost in the system. And also, I don't want to forget the families of people with mental health problems, because they are very often just forgotten. And they are collateral, like victims also of illnesses and of the system. So I think it's important. We in Split have another NGO who offers peer support groups for family members, because they also need to support how to go alongside us in the road of recovery. So for now, this is what we are doing. We are planning to create a like little, how to say, Phoenix Center, where people would come every day. It's a certain period of time that they can just play chess or read a book or make themselves a coffee, because very often they're just in the streets and left very often, unfortunately, from their families and parents and especially friends. So they usually don't have job, but of course it's not always the case. So they need a place where they are welcomed and when they can have like nice time together. So this is not typical peer support work, but this is what we created in our community. Two of them have quite different, I think, experiences.
Yeah.
I'm curious also to hear
I mean,
in Ireland and in Norway how it looks like.
Yeah, I think you described peer support there really wonderfully, and it achieves so much. And I suppose lived experience is a wide application. It's got lots of applications, and it's a set of knowledge that can be used in many ways. And internally in organisations, as well as to improve how things are done. And I can think of some very practical examples of where there was issues with things like people not showing up for appointments, and that's kind of slows things down, and it means there's a time that someone else could be seen and so on. But engaging with service users around that, why is this happening, and very practical things were discovered, like you send a letter, I've moved, you send a text messages, I don't have a phone, the appointment's at 9 a.m. in the morning, the bus doesn't come till 10 a.m., these kind of things. So working with the person, what works for you, and other issues like improving human rights, like the allowing people to not to wear their pajamas in hospital, and and I remember a very powerful dialogue between a lady and a psychiatrist, who says, you've taken away my dignity here because I'm in my pajamas, but you're in your suit and tie. So there's a big power imbalance, and that really changed that person's perspective, and that was changed. So things like that at a very simple but practical level, but more understanding then about the need for different kinds of services, peer-led services, in the community, where people can go during the day, and learn about recovery and feel more part of, rather than a part of their community. So there's a lot of different applications of lived experience, but it brings that perspective, and it comes back, what will make things better for the people using our services, and that has to be the touchstone all the time. And we have to come back to that fidelity question as much as possible. How can I help somebody achieve a better quality of life today? That's kind of the question. And I suppose in my work in Ireland with the HSE, I'm fortunate, I suppose, that there's an organisational commitment and there's a policy that tries to support this way of working. And my job then is to try and work with the system, to allow the voice of lived experience to be heard, and to allow recovery innovation to happen. And there are certain things that people with lived experience, do better than people with non-lived experience. And obviously peer support is one, but recovery education, and engaging with what people would call seldom heard voices, or marginalised groups, where there's a huge trust issue. So somebody who has lived experience of that situation or whatever can bridge that gap much more easily. So there's a huge benefit to including lived experience. And you talked about the quality rights there, and it is a person's human right, that they should have autonomy in decisions about their own life and their own healthcare. That's non-negotiable, and we, for that reason, we shouldn't be having any other discussion on this. But if you stop there, you would miss so much else, the richness that lived experience brings, and how it can transform services. And that's what this is really about.
And I think there's also an imperative really here to start thinking a bit broader when it comes to the role of lived experience. I think in some services around the world, lived experience can be a bit pigeonholed as peer support or something on the service provision side. But how can we integrate the lived experience voice in everything to do with mental health services? To take the European region's roadmap or the WHO's mental health policy guidelines, where we're talking about, you can't create a mental health, you shouldn't create a mental health policy or legal framework without the lived experience voice being an integral part of it and involved in it. The lived experience role in policy, in education of health professionals, and then the wider kind of political conversation. I think we're even where it's working well, I think, I'm not sure what the guys would think, I think we have a tendency toward tokenism, that it's kind of stuck on at the end, or we need to be moving toward a more bottom-up approach, that we're building building services that are in line with that which people actually want, and that which people actually feel helpful that have used them, and moving away from things that we're getting very clear input from people with lived experience. Well, that isn't helpful. Coercion and coercive practices are not something that are promoting recovery. Rights and rights abuses and discrimination are something that impair my ability to be fully integrated in this society that I want to be a part of. That's the thing that gets very quickly hopped over, and I don't necessarily think it's always from a bad place. I think clinicians and perhaps politicians that often have a tendency to listen to clinicians, they don't really think about that. That our rights aren't being actively discriminated against. It's easy to either turn a blind eye or just not be that conscious of it, I think, and that therefore you can create services that can work against recovery, even though that wasn't the original intention. I think that's why I think the lived experience perspective it's a big check and balance, and it's essential to creating recovery orientated services.
I extra appreciate that there is psychiatrists saying that behind this table, so thank you for that. And I agree that for us being a country that's watching other countries implement peer support groups, so it's a bad place to be that late in development of it, but it's still good because you can learn from other people's experiences. And there are unfortunately also some bad experiences where exactly happened what you just described, that they implemented peer support but without real understanding from the whole structures what it really means, because it means not just to add another employee, but it's about social change and dynamics, how you actually come to the different cases and how you talk around the table and respect different knowledge of nurses and different practitioners, psychotherapists, psychologists, because I don't know, but in our countries very often those voices are also silenced, and only medical psychiatrist knowledge is really appreciated. And being a person who needed support from all these people, I don't think that's good. So creating a table, a real round table where people are equal, and peer worker is one of them who offers, but not just one, preferably more of them, because these power dynamics are also very, very strong and hard if you're just one peer worker in a team. Yep. So there are examples, and World Health Organization also suggests some points that needs to be taken care of. If you want to implement that, and I hope that everyone wants to implement it, the most important reason is because it really works. And if you want people to be happy and living fulfilling life again, then we need to make this change. To feel these specific emotions, and then you say, then you know how to do your job better also. So I think collaboration, co-creation, but real co-creation where we are really curious about each other's perspective. So it's about communication also, and about every person's in the team willingness to respect diversity in the teams also. So that's also important. So let's do it, but let's do it in a really right way.
Yeah, I think that really speaks to me too. And just listening there, I was thinking about the importance of reflective practice and that. And you were talking about somebody being in a room and when you sit in a room and someone is coming in with more power than you, is going to make decisions about your life, and you've never met this person before, so they can know very little about you. Peter, you were talking about the need for the professional to be able to think about, well, what's it like for the person, but it goes beyond that as well into that reflective practice space. Well, what's it like for me, or what would it be like for me? How would I want this conversation to go, and what would I, as we spoke about earlier, what would I want to know about this situation? So that's very important, and it's about reconnecting all of us back to our own humanity. People with lived experience, of mental health challenges, that's their mental health journey. But it's trying to give other people the opportunity to connect back to, their own humanity. And, the word vocation, I suppose, now is old-fashioned in some parts. But for me, I think it's always important because, people came into the profession, there was some altruistic piece around it, that they want to make other people's lives better. And that's what we've got to try and, hook onto and get that back. And, things around risk and governance and all these things get in the way. But we have to, take those away and just get it back to a relationship between two people, one who needs help and the other who's trying to help. And I know when in my own experience, I didn't trust services and I came into hospital at a very young age and was told I might never leave. And so I basically ran away, and it was many years before I came back. But I had a great distrust of professionals and services and so on. I thought they were out to get me or something in some way. And yet I was demanding of them, that you treat me with respect in a person. But I wasn't willing to reciprocate in the other way. So, the relationship, I suppose, has to be both ways. And I was fortunate that I met, a psychiatrist and people who were willing to work in that way with me. But I don't believe that it's people with lived experience, are the only ones who have, the potential to espouse, human values. I think we all have, and it's just given us the opportunity to do that.
And just to build on what you're saying, Michael, about power imbalance and reflective practice around that, I think to bring in the rights perspective, it's also about, taking that extra step and then creating services that actually address those power imbalances and actually address those human rights abuses, and no longer create services where that is permissible or allowed or thought of as treatment. That's kind of, and that where I think both the lived experience voice and people with a clinical background need to be pulling together in order to make that a reality as well. And one of my thoughts, I'm not sure what you guys think, is that the more that people with lived experience and that voice and that perspective are included in existing services, the more the kind of cognitive dissonance around how services actually works kind of bubbles up and creates a problem that needs to be solved. Actually, are these the type of services that support recovery? We've been hearing from our lived experience colleagues at the team discussions that the barriers are just more and more open and obvious, perhaps. I think there's I really do have a belief here that the lived experience voice can actually influence the services in which it's integrated. And I think we no longer get to hide behind the kind of, this is the way it's always been, or, these are
and it's not working.
These are the rules around it that we have to follow. I think it kind of is a bit of a call to action, to put it in those terms. And that only happens, that's what we see it often in the quality rights trainings, that when you get people in the same room, that's when the obvious kind of dilemmas really bubble up and deserve being looked at more closely.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But I think it says it aloud. It's already there. So people working in the services who doesn't, for whatever reason, respect human rights and if they don't have enough personnel or they're not trained enough, they can't be happy working in a system who does harm, and the system who doesn't work or bring people back to like beautiful, fruitful life they could go. So I think this change is needed from both sides. So if that specific hospital or department doesn't work, let's go together to change it. Better close it until it's the right context for real work and for real healing of a person. So yeah, I think we should be together with it, but that also but it's very hard for us if you've been hurt in the system, and then I need to understand how it's hard for you. Mm-hmm. I somehow can understand that it's hard for you, maybe because I was previously a student on practice, and I that was my calling before. But when you've been hurt, it's very hard to not be angry. And I think it's healthy to be angry, to protect yourself. And then you need to work through that anger to sit at the table and really listen also, that psychiatrist and that nurse and their perspective. And I think opening these bridges is the only way. There are people who get healed without the system, and they don't want, they don't need, and they use pharmacotherapy, they even don't go to psychotherapy, they have their own different path, like spiritual or whatever is their path, and I think we should respect that too. But there are still, and it will probably for a long time, will be people who still needs psychiatrists and who need that sorts of therapy. And for them, I think it's our mutual goal to create services who are humane and who are warm and welcoming, and not to be the person who needs to heal themselves extra from the treatment where you came to ask for help.
Yeah.
I think that's completely, it shouldn't happen. And it's happening everywhere.
Very, very much, and I think that what you're saying about the, anger and frustration toward a system that isn't working for people, that doesn't necessarily have to be a negative. Totally the opposite.
Yeah.
That can be a great impetus for change. And I think, for all of its faults, and there are many, psychiatry does have a track record of change. Things are different and better than they were 40 years ago, 100 years ago, 20 years ago. I think hopefully, would represent a profession that is focused on quality improvement, focused on doing things better, focused on meeting needs in a way that actually promotes recovery and promotes people being more included in their societies. I think sometimes we get stuck in repetitive kind of discussions and forget that actually this is moving in a way that's positive for everybody, I think.
I can understand if you're working something for 20 years in the same way and your professors taught you how to do it, and then your supervisors or whatever, and now someone is coming and saying, no, that's completely wrong, you've done harm to people for 20 years. That's really hard to swallow, and especially if that person is a patient, and maybe you're a patient. You need to jump in your head like 3 times to be really, and I really respect people who are willing and like self-aware enough to stay with that discomfort and possibility that was actually happening, because I really believe, you said everything is getting better. I think some parts are worse than it was.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, some parts are like, it was better like 60 years for some part. So, but I think we need to address also the discomfort. It is very hard to make a shift and to say, okay, let's try differently. I drink tea every day at certain, so if you tell me, no, it's better to do it this way, I would be like, no. And this is much higher stakes. So I can respect that. But again, what you just said before, this change is necessary. And it will, in the long run, make everyone happier, because you will come home from your job much more satisfied, because you knew that you fulfilled your calling and your vocation, and that you really enriched someone's life instead of what's happening very often in nowadays. And I always remember when I watched the movie about open dialogue and nurse Mia Kurti and their team in Finland, in Lapland, how they said, oh, we really love our job. We can't wait to go to work there. And I believe if you ask psychiatrists or nurses on many other places, they wouldn't be sure how to answer. And they love their job at the beginning. So that's also the sign that change is needed.
I think that's very important too. And, people are doing wrong because they're misguided. They don't set out with the intention of to set back someone's recovery. They think they're actually aiding them. And like you described, when people have heard stories, I've seen people cry and get very upset. So we need to have a humility about how we engage with people, because they've been trained in this way. And I remember a nurse told me a story one time after I gave a talk somewhere, and very sincerely came to me and said, when I was going to school, I was told there was 5 continents, and then years later somebody told me there was 7, and I couldn't figure out where the other 2 came from. He said, what you've told me today is just like that. You've told me something that's completely different to what I've always done and always thought was right. And that had a profound effect on me, because I recognised the sincerity in this person, and I realised that I needed to have some humility here and say, and really engage with the people and listen to them in the same way I wanted them to listen to me. Part of my work would be around trying to introduce, say, peer support workers onto clinical teams or that, and I would go and meet the team and we'd talk about it, and the questions they would ask, are very kind of predictable. What happens if the person gets sick? Do they understand confidentiality? Can they cope with the pressure? All these kind of things that come from, a deficit mindset. And, but, you talk about it, and the peer support worker would go on the team, and you go back 6 months or a year later just to check in, and it's completely changed. It's usually a very positive experience, and it's immersion that changes things. It's side by side in the trenches, and realizing that we're not actually that different at all. So I think that's a very important piece of it as well, that we're all working together to that common goal, and it's creating that unity.
So I'm going to seize on a word that I think you said, co-creation. And I think you guys have been talking about it for a while now, but I want to bring it back up and just ask you all to reflect on people with lived experience practitioners, and people with professional experience need to work together in order to make this change happen. How can that be done?
Yeah, I think we've talked a little bit about this, that it has to start from a position of seeing lived experience as a resource, as something that can expand the way that a service understands people, and that can improve people's experiences in meeting with services. I think when co-creation, this is my own opinion, co-creation doesn't work from a place of power and balance, perhaps. I think hierarchical structures and services are doomed to fail in that regard. That's where you get in the realms of tokenism. So I think that's why voices like yourselves talking about and Ireland being a good example. I'm a proud Irishman as well as a Norwegian, so that's an example of a service that's integrating lived experience on a very broad basis, and that's having real change both at the ground level, but also at a policy and legal level as well. So using positive examples and showing that is this is something that can improve quality as well as being something that is rooted in rights-based approaches, which is something that we should all be working toward.
Irish.
Yeah, I agree absolutely, and I suppose co-creation is, how does it work, or how can we make it work? And I think that we have to ground ourselves in the principles and values always of why are we here, and we're here because there's a person here in front of us who needs help. That has to be the focus point, on the person, and what can we do to help that person, and it's understanding that kind of contemporary understanding of recovery being holistic. It's about the person in their life and who they want to become as a person, and what do we need to do to support them. The person themselves has to be at the centre, so that's the first piece of co-creation is between the person, and the team. And then the person thinks, about the wider part of their life and, what they want to do and change. And, maybe then it's about, co-creation with their family support or their, their support network. And, then it's probably co-creation, beyond, just the mental health team or whatever, that it's about what other organisations can help. Is it housing? Is it employment? So you're bringing those into the question as well. So it's that it's a little bit about trying to follow the service user's journey. So what on that journey we talk about of recovery. And at different stages of that journey, different, expertise is needed. And it's about having them available to work with the person and work with the team. So, I think that's why co-creation is very important. And it's understanding that there's different types of expertise, and while all, should be equal at different times, that they may be more required by the person than others. But it's always brought back to that question, what does the person need, and then that should be the question that decides what actions are taken.
I always see in pictures of when he was saying it was like steering wheel of road recovery is in the hands of the person themselves, and other people are just on the boat together. So yeah, that's like the basic.
And that taking some of those core principles of recovery as well, in terms of that co-creation is also, it's about who's in the driver's seat, but it's also about that idea of supported decision making, that actually making decisions is difficult, is hard. We all have a varying ability to make decisions, particularly when we're under high levels of stress, but the right to make a decision, that shouldn't be taken away from us. I think that's what feeds into that idea of co-creation. That's why in the trauma clinic that I work in, we're increasingly focused on, let's start making plans together and talk about difficult things when things are going well, so that we can get your thoughts, preferences, how you actually want to be supported when storms happen in life. That I think that's an element of co-creation that I feel really quite passionately about, because it's such a helpful clinical tool to kind of use the kind of doctory expression that it's often when I get a recovery plan in my lap for someone that I don't know from previously, I have a recipe sitting in front of me. Suddenly I have 100 different ideas in terms of how I can maybe support and create a connection here and to help somebody out of a difficult place. I wouldn't have that if that person hadn't done a bit of preventative work or met somebody that was interested in recovery planning. That's a plan written by the person, not necessarily co-created, but the co-creation happens the moment it's kind of presented to someone in the middle of a difficult experience. I think it's almost unending how big the co-creation and important it can be.
I think that's a very important point. The right of a person to choose, obviously within is the heart of this, but it's also the right to maybe for the person to take a risk or maybe make what might end up as a bad choice, Yep. So it's the right to fail, and so we have to take away that paternalistic approach to how we look at things, and really, if we're talking about giving people autonomy, then we really have to mean it, and also accept what it means and support what it means. Recently in Ireland, we're redrafting the Mental Health Act, and there was a phrase in it, in best interests, which has been taken out under consultation with people with lived experience, because like, who decides what's in best interests, and it's been placed with, in line with the preference and choice of the person. So it's just giving the person full freedom, to make whatever choice they think is right, and allowing
and even
the
if you
consequences
don't
of that.
understand the choice, it's easy when you have similar ideas, but when it's different, then it's hard to stay with, I will respect your choice, even I believe it won't be helpful for you. So that's the part when we need to practice real respect. And just to be practical, for instance, someone, when it's in distress, among us on this table, some of us would prefer to be alone in some room and in quiet place, and other person would prefer to be hugged and held close. So we can't know that unless you already done that sort of planning with the person, and then when some crisis happens, the person still feels like it's heard, even if maybe I don't have at that specific time, I can't express maybe then. Even I believe that we can express if we are asked. But then when you have it written, then it's like very empowering, because it's still you're still respected. Even you maybe won't remember some part of it, but you remember the treatment, you remember the energy, you remember respect if it's given or not. So these plans, I think they're amazing, and also recovery. Recovery wheel is one tool that in Croatia Dr. Vezić developed, which I really love, because it looks like a wheel of the ship, and it has many different aspects, not just symptoms. It's, as I said, self-respect, housing, money situation, friendships, purpose, everything is included. And you are the person who decides which part is important for me and in which percentage. So I decide, would I want to develop this and this and this. And it's very empowering even when you see it visually, because after you see, even if you are at a terrible state, and if you compare yourself to symptoms and diagnosis, but you say, okay, but I'm good in this with housing, I'm good with friends, okay, job is maybe a little this and this is there. So it's much more empowering than just listing all the stuff that's wrong about me, and that should be helpful. Not really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also an invitation to a bit more of a dynamic process as well, that then, in terms of that, going back to that co-creation question, there's also an opportunity to stop up after and think, okay, well, what went well there? What worked? From the clinician point of view, did I say anything, do anything that was helpful? Did I say anything, do anything that was unhelpful? How can we avoid that the next time? It becomes more of a conversation and more of a conversation that would be in line with, in my opinion, core therapy principles. That kind of trying to understand the other person in front of you. So I think a lot of the stuff we're talking about today, it's good for rights. It's good for people with lived experience. I would also make the argument it's also good practice, and I go so far as say best practice. That it's in line with existing best practice notions, and I think I always feel quite strongly I want to sell that bit in as well, because usually doctors, nurses, psychologists, they're quite interested in that. They like the idea of improving, of making things better, of increasing some of our quite paltry results at times, and giving people better outcomes. So I think that's another aspect that I think is important with these
Additional
approaches.
value, yeah.
How at odds is this concept of co-creation with the current system?
You love to talk about
No,
it.
you
Well, I think it's more, unfortunately, a good idea than reality. Because, as I said before, and all of us said, it needs social change, that we change as a people, not just professionals, to change our perspectives. So very often it's just, you can be a part of the system. For instance, I am in some boards where I'm the only person with lived experience. But if there is no real understanding what's my role and my field of expertise, then I'm really invisible in there. And it's even hurtful for me because I need to witness some really sad stories, and my experience is not recognized as same value as someone who is a lawyer or psychiatrist. And I think in many countries it's unfortunately included in this way, just tokenistic, in a way that it's supposed to be there, okay, we will do it because World Health Organization said so, that it needs to be done. But there is no real understanding among people who are doing this, neither in a policy level or understanding, even less understanding in a concrete situations where it should be employed. So I think this preparation process, that there is real understanding why and how, in what way, is very, very, very important, that this doesn't happen, because this is not the change that we want.
I think that things are definitely changing and improving. I mean, you know, the fact that we're having this conversation, it wouldn't probably be happening 20 years ago. You wouldn't have a couple of people with lived experience around the table. You wouldn't have as many peer support workers in the system. And so I think change is happening, and in co-creation and the inclusion of lived experience is more common now, you know, more acceptable. There's still, you know, a journey to go. But I think there's an understanding now that, you know, maybe things like health economics are forcing in co-creation as well, because, you know, systems can't get enough professionals and so on. You know, the burden of mental health challenges is constantly increasing, as you're talking about, due to societal pressures and so on. So how's our systems going to cope? They're going to have to come up with a new way of meeting, you know, these challenges. And, you know, co-creation, you know, increases your resources. You know, it brings in extra expertise. That's what we're saying. So you know, I think that people that will become more and more recognised. And I suppose one of the things we need to focus on is gathering the evidence, as Peter is talking about there. We need to be better at capturing that. You know, that when we give work in a recovery orientated way, when we listen to the person, you know, when we give them space to live their own life and make their own decisions, you know, it improves outcomes, and gives better service experience for staff as well. So we need to start capturing all that. Co-creation, you know, is it, you know, some of the arguments against it are, you know, it's too slow. You know, I won't get all the things I need to have done, but it's about quality. You know, that's the difference. You know, that's a quality, a way of working. That, you know, it mightn't reduce your waiting room list today, but within 6 months or a year, you'll have people using the services less because they're making more decisions. They understand what it means to keep themselves well better. So I think there's an education piece needed around it, and obviously any change is challenging and difficult. So there's, you know, we have to listen to people's concerns about working in this way, and role clarity is very important. And, you know, it's working in this expanded understanding of what a contemporary mental health service needs to look like, and what this notion of recovery is, and its holistic implications. You know, where my profession, if you like, or my expertise is still essential, but it's just one of many that we need to work together. So I think it's trying to frame it in that way that we need to do.
It would come back to the idea that it's, you know, in my opinion, it'd be power imbalance and rights abuses get in the road of get in the way of co-creation, really. And I think that's an important and thorny topic. You know, how can we create, as the WHO are trying to have produced recent guidelines on legal frameworks around mental health? What do they actually look like if we want to create legal frameworks that in line with the CRPD? What does our policy framework look like? I think these are challenges that have to be addressed in order to truly realise that hope for co-creation. But it's not necessarily something we have to wait for. There's a lot of things that can be done in advance, and that can start at a very basic, human level between someone in a supporting role and someone looking for support, really.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, building on that, how do people start this co-creative process? One thing that struck me when towards the beginning of this conversation is that both of your experiences of getting involved in the system were through this co-creation with people working in the system. So for you, it was some clinicians who you worked with, and for you, it was the same. How can these processes be facilitated, and what can people expect as they embark on this process?
I'd also just throw in there in response to that I think it's maybe also important to say that I don't think co-creation is a foreign concept to people working in services. And I think, it's good to remind people about that as well. To use a simple example, therapy. What happens in my therapy room? It's not something I do to somebody. It's a co-creative process that you find your way through. I think a lot of mental health professionals have that background, and that makes implicit sense to them. I think even something as biomedical as helping someone with withdrawal symptoms and planning, getting off medication, for instance, that's a co-creative process that is wholly dependent on the information that you're getting from the other person sitting in front of you. So I think I kind of want to also demystify what we're talking about as well. That this is kind of something that we're potentially pretty good at doing already, but we need policy and legal frameworks to make us do more of it and demand that we do more of it, and also the lived experience perspective being properly integrated. Yeah.
And this power, this balance that we are aware of, and that we diminish it. So that's basically, for me, this hierarchy is the greatest rock of disturbance, because if you remove that, then this happens naturally because people just share their perspectives. I love Tom Anderson's reflecting team model, where you just share and afterwards you hear some people are watching and you're sharing your experiences, then you exchange your roles, and then you'll watch it from another perspective. So these layers and layers of knowledge became just visible, and no one is the more or less valuable. They are just different perspectives. Because as we know, in everyday life, when you have some problem, I don't know, with lunch, we can't employ same solutions every day. Sometimes we need more salt, sometimes pepper, sometimes water. So it's same for me, I think, in every context. But just this awareness, I think, is new. Awareness that every person is important and equal, and that the person is in the center and it's about us. The services exist because someone needs those services. So it's quite logical that that person has a mic to say, no, I don't like this and I prefer this version. So I think it is possible, but some things need to change fast because there are humanity rights violations. I was unfortunately lived it on my own skin 4 times when I was hospitalized, and it's not something that I wish I haven't had these experiences. But as I already say, I try to learn from them and to understand why other people are doing this to some other people and believing it's for our own good. Because if you ask me, it's definitely not. It's not true. And sorry to say that, but it's not true. So we need to change stuff. And if there is a will, there is a way. And what I also realize very often, people, oh, we don't have money, we are a poor country. It's not about money. I think the biggest obstacle is in people's minds and in this fear of new and of the change. Even if someone tells you change is good, we are like reluctant. So it's in nature of human. But this change needs to be done, and it's a revolution already Somewhere is faster, somewhere is slower. And we can learn also from each other, from different country to country, different context. It's not applicable everywhere, everything. We are different, luckily. That's the beauty of the world. But co-creation is like, I think, the only way that we can actually be human, like share our knowledge, our perspective, my experiences, what are yours, and no one is right. We are both right, and it's possible to be in the same time, like both truths or 3 truths or 5 truths, but afterwards it's important about outcome. That person it's really there and feel seen and heard and not alone and empowered in their own strengths, and also aware of their own, like maybe some tricky parts and things that needs to work on. So yeah, I like that you say we need to demystify it and just say, let's sit around the table and hear each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, I categorically agree with what both of you have said. Co-creation is about people working in relationship, in partnership to achieve a common goal, and that is, as you say, that it's about the person that's in front of us, who has come here for help. How can we help this person? What do we need to do to help them? That's always that should be the routine question. What are we here to do and why we're here? And it's because of a person. And I think that there are certain things, I suppose, that need to happen to help co-creation. And even at an individual level of the person themselves, they need to co-create. They need to come into relationship with their own mental health, the part that's sick, that has been dominant and encouraged to be dominant. But there's another part. What about the strengths in each person? So bringing that kind of engagement with self, I think, is very important. And at an organisational level, I mean, there needs to be, policy that underpins this. Rights legislation needs to be enforced, and there needs to be accountability. And nobody is going to object to recovery on principle of someone having a better life, but it's not enforced, so there needs to be some sort of a check. Are services working in this way? A lot of them are publicly funded with the public's money, so we expect you to employ public policy and so on. So people have to be held to their accountable, and if they're not, something needs to be done about it. And that's that may sound challenging or whatever, but but it can't be done in a vacuum. We need to sit down and listen to people and say, what is your concerns, about doing this, and how can we support you to do it? But it's not acceptable anymore that people don't have their rights honoured, don't have their autonomy honoured, and don't have freedom of choice. And co-creation is the way to do that. But as you say, Peter, I mean, we can complicate it too much, but it's really about people sitting down and talking to each other. And I remember the first time I heard about the concept of recovery college, and I was thinking, that's a great idea, we should have one of them. But I was thinking, we need buildings, and we need libraries, and we need professors or whatever. But when I went and spoke to Julie Repper about it, she said, all you need, Michael, is a table, a chair and a cup of tea, and 2 people who want to talk about recovery. And that's how simple this needs to be. And that's I don't think we'll get a better definition of co-creation than that.
I like it.
I've been informed that we now have less than 10 minutes for our conversation, so I think that maybe now as we can start looking forward a bit. And we've been doing that the entire time, not to say that we haven't, but now it's more, okay, with all of this out there, it sounds like there's an enormous wealth of information. there's enormous wealth of models, of approaches, of organizations. I want to hear from each of you how somebody who is a novice in this area, who is wanting to help, who's wanting to do something, maybe somebody who has gone through the system and wants to do something similar to what you did in Croatia, or what you're doing in Norway, or what you're doing in Ireland. Where should they start? And this is also an opportunity to plug whatever you're doing now, you know, to bring us the information and the tools that you found helpful in making, you know, things different in your respective spaces. So I would like to start with Marina.
So as I said before, just start where you are with what you have. We didn't have much. We still don't have after 6 years the building or the place or anything, but we just borrow from people. And people widen, like citizens, they're aware this is a big problem, not just because of percentages and hospitals, but because every family has someone who has certain challenges with mental health. So mental health is something that's important to all of us. So just, this is at least the way that I'm doing it. If I don't have it, we just ask. We use social platforms. We ask on Facebook people, can someone borrow us one space? We want to meet once in a week to talk about some challenges that we have. We don't have money to pay. And people say, okay, do you want this space or this space? And then you need a car to go there, and they also offer that. So my experience is that people are really it's everywhere. It's in the air. People are aware of it. And it starts without a stigma. It starts with dismantling it, like saying I think it was 10 or more years ago when I was asked to be in local newspaper, the biggest one in our county, and I was on the front page with the title "Psychiatry is Dark Place in the Basements That We Are Not Talked About." And my family didn't want to talk about me. They were so angry, like, what are you, Marina, doing? You will lose the job, your son will have problems in the school, you know, how is the stigma, you should be silent. And I understood them, and they are very right, but that makes me even more stubborn and angry, because I shouldn't be embarrassed or silenced because experiences that I'm having. I'm not guilty because of that. So I was still in the newspaper. And when I see from that time and today in my city, there is much more conversation about mental health, less stigma. There is still, of course, and I believe it will still be, but we need to really first look ourselves in the mirror and say, like, okay, I have some challenges, but I'm still an amazing human, and I have lots to give and lots of love to receive from others. So just start there. And then some other people will also come who are on the same path, because this is really a sort of revolution and it's happening everywhere, either we want it or not. So people just come. And then walk your talk, and with time it changes. I hope that one day, if I'm in some crisis, I can choose. For instance, I would prefer to go somewhere in the forest, in some nice cabin, and that I have access to maybe a therapist, maybe a psychiatrist, and maybe dance and use this as a tool also. Of course, this is a dream, but there were also crazier dreams. So I wish that people can really choose what works for them, and that's recognized and that's respected. And I think any country, whatever state they are, how much money they have or not, can do small steps towards this. Like in existent institutions, there is enough one person who is willing to change and to talk differently and to work differently to start a change. There is an amazing quote, I always forget, I think it's Mead, who says, don't ever doubt that small group of people can change the world. It's the only thing that ever changed it. So that's something that I lived by. So I wish this is like the seed that continues everywhere, that resonates with people.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, in terms of how to get involved, I think there's a wealth of information already out there. I think if I was starting out and thinking about how I would get involved, I would make contact with a local group for people with lived experience, a user organisation. If I was a clinician, I would be thinking about how can I integrate that lived experience perspective in my own work, and how can I skill myself up on things like advanced planning, supported decision making. You know, what we've been doing in our clinic is kind of almost comes from a point of, you know, frustration that things do move slowly, and we kind of looked at the quality rights materials and thought that, look, we've got a recovery plan sitting here that the clients using our service would, some of them had already used it, and we built a group around that, a 10-week group where people work on the notion of what it is to be in recovery, how can I build a plan around managing difficult times, and how can I set that in the context of complex trauma as a way of working through some of that complex trauma. And then we just get a lot of positive feedback on that is a gap that people feel is very helpful. And I think that's a kind of, you know, a simple example of a tool that's just sitting there, that's designed by people with lived experience, that is used actively all around the world, that any service can introduce it at an individual level, or as we've done, build a group offer around it, and it takes almost very little effort, and that's a way to start creating a more recovery oriented service. Yeah.
And finally, Michael.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, I'd agree with what both have said. I think it's very important that the conversation continues, you know, so, you know, thanks very much to the WHO for hosting this, you know, podcast and giving us the opportunity to talk about it. And, you know, that has to keep happening, you know, to get these ideas out there, you know, and media need to run with this as well in terms of lived experience and stories. And, you know, we just have to keep those conversations going. That's a very important piece. And, you know, if you're looking at this, and no matter what your circumstance, if you're someone struggling with mental health challenges, you know, think about, you know, who can I start talking about my mental health to in a safe space. You know, there's online peer support groups. There's some recovery colleges you can go to online as well. So even if it's not in your own area, your own country, you know, as Peter was saying, reach out. You will find, you know, help. And you know, just as you spoke, Mariana, there, you know, the Kevin Costner and Field of Dreams came into my mind. You know, build it and they will come. You know, and I know of one story of somebody who set up a recovery group going back to the early days in addiction, and 5 years sitting in a room on his own, and eventually somebody else came, you know, and it went on to flourish. So, but I think there's an organisational commitment to this as well, to those that are in the opportunity to push the concept of recovery, to do so, and lived experience. I think that's very important, and you know, there's a lot of I suppose strategic groups working out there as well. There's the Global Leadership Exchange Programme, which is very important, bringing lived experience leaders together, you know, to see how we can all work together to promote lived experience. And I think a very important piece is the WHO's roadmap on lived experience to, you know, transform services through lived experience. I was involved in the production of that myself, and it's now moving to phase 2. So I would, you know, recommend people to look that up, and it's at a starting point. And so it's really about keeping the conversation going and doing what you can. You know, if you're a clinician sitting looking at this, you know, and you have a team meeting, you know, can you put it on the agenda that once a month we'll talk about this? We'll try and find out more about it. And, you know, that's the different. And I would say, you know, that the most important thing anybody can do is to bring it into their own perspective on their own situation. Think about, you know, what if it was me? You know, what if it was my spouse, my partner? You know, what would I want to happen for them, and how would I want to be treated, and what would I want to experience? And, you know, the hope is the most important message. You know, whoever may be listening to this, and I've had the privilege of sitting here for the last while, and you know, hearing both Peter and Mariana, you know, talking about this, and Jason, and you know, there was a time, you know, when I was in my room, and I was locked in with the curtains drawn and the door locked, and wouldn't go out, you know, and that I saw no future. So I couldn't imagine, you know, what a gift recovery could give. So I want people to take hope out there, you know, that you can get well and things can get better, and that if you're a practitioner or a policy maker or whoever, you know, you can play your part as well, because the tools are there. You know, reach out and take them, you know, come and, you know, talk to WHO or us or any of us, you know, and this can happen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, all.
Thank you.
Thank you.